Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you a 5-star predictions video with an autumnal twist. So I have done a couple of 5-star prediction videos in the past to varying degrees of success. I don't think I've read everything off of those 2 videos, but I have loved a lot of those books as predicted. They were 5 stars, maybe 4, and there are a couple of notable exceptions where I did not love the books nearly as much as I had thought. So I haven't done one of these in a long time, and I do find it really fun to kind of try to predict what I'm gonna really love, because sometimes I can very much be taken by surprise. So because it is October, I decided that I wanted to do some spooky books. So all of these are historical fiction or horror. Actually, I think they're all historical fiction. I thought that I had one like modern horror book in here, but I don't think it is. I think it might actually be kind of World War II set. It's not very specific in the description. So this is a really, really solid roundup of kind of gothic-y, spooky historical fiction books that I would like to read and I think I'm gonna love. I have really been shifting toward this sort of gothic-y horror and historical fiction lately. It's something that my brain just can't get enough of, and I am absolutely loving it. So these are all books that I've had on my shelf for a fairly long time, with one exception, which is a 2021 release, and I'm super pumped to kind of pop these back on my radar, maybe even pop them on my nightstand and go ahead and get cracking. So I have 7 books to show you here, and I just would like to go ahead and dive right in. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the 2021 release. This book comes out in January 2021, and because it is the 4th book by this author, who I have had very good luck with and happens to be one of my favorites, I think that this is gonna be a 5-star read for me. It's kind of a no-brainer, but I am a little bit cautious. This is The Shape of Darkness by Laura Purcell. The Silent Companions and Bone China are 2 of my favorite books. They are her 1st and 3rd historical, kind of gothic-y historical fiction books. I didn't love The Corset. I actually DNF'd that, which was a huge surprise to me and very disappointing at the time. So I am a little bit cautious saying that I think that this is going to instantly be a 5-star read because it's Laura Purcell, because I feel like I have been a little bit burned in the past. But I'm really looking forward to this because it looks fabulous and very, very spooky. I think it's going to be great kind of fall and winter reading. So basically in this book we follow a character named Agnes, and she is a Victorian silhouette drawer, and she's kind of at the dawn of the age of photography, so her business is struggling a little bit. So she's trying to scrape together all the money she can to support her, I believe her mother and her nephew, and she's really struggling because not only is this new art form taking over and taking business away from her, her clients are being murdered one by one shortly after sitting for her, which is definitely bad for business. So she decides to visit Pearl, who is a renowned child spirit medium, and she wants to get answers. She wants to reach out to the other side and figure out what is going on here. And it looks like the 2 of them accidentally sort of opened the door to something darker and more sinister. This sounds great. I'm really looking forward to this. I think Laura Purcell is a fabulous author. I love how atmospheric and spooky her books are. I love her sort of way of leaning into the paranormal but making it feel really, really suited to the time period that she's writing in. And of course the Victorians were obsessed with mediums and spirits and the paranormal, and I think that this is just going to be an absolutely fabulous read. So this is one that I'm actually going to be reading very, very soon because this is a proof copy. I have to read it for the publisher, which is the reason that I have it. And yeah, I think this is going to be a fabulous, fabulous book. I've got really, really high hopes for this one. The next book is actually one that I had started reading, or technically listening to, with my friend as we were lift sharing into work, and the audiobook didn't really click with either of us, but it was one that I was still interested in picking up in a physical format because I think it's going to be an exceptional book that just doesn't really suit audio very well. This is Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. So this book is set in 1863, I believe, and we follow a character named Bridie Devine, who is the finest female detective of her age. She's kind of, I hate to constantly make this comparison, but she's kind of a Detective Holmes type person. So she is reeling from her last case, her reputation is apparently in tatters, and she stumbles upon a puzzle that may be able to kind of like help satisfy her and get herself back on track. This child named Christabel is missing, but the problem is there's something not quite right about this particular child. She's not really supposed to exist. So as she's investigating this case, she sort of enters this underworld in which anomalies are in fashion and people will pay anything to get their hands on something strange and unusual. And indeed, there is something strange and unusual about this child. So as I say, I have listened to a little bit of this book so far, and I just don't think that the writing style suits audiobooks very well, but I do think that it is beautifully written, and I think this is going to be a fascinating one. I think that it's going to pull in a lot more sort of paranormal stuff than the blurb kind of implies. So I'm very, very excited because, as with Laura Purcell, I always love books that sort of pull that side of things into historical fiction. There's something about historical fiction and horror, sort of the paranormal, that blend so perfectly together. The next book on my list is one that I'm really, really excited for, partially because it sounds fabulous, but also this author has a new book coming out in March, which sounds incredible, and I want to get caught up on her work before that comes out. So this is Little Eve by Katrina Ward. I also could have picked Raw Blood, which I also have on my shelf. That was her debut novel, but this is the one that I decided to pull off the shelf mostly because it was at hand. So both of her books I'm really excited to read and I think are going to be fabulous. So the kind of copy for this book, the summary, is a little bit vague, which is normally exactly what I want, that's what I love, but it is a little bit difficult to explain to you guys why I think a book is going to be 5 stars if I can't really tell you what it's about. So in this instance, I went ahead and looked up a Goodreads review. I'll link this review down below if you want to check out more because it's a pretty solid review. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and not read the copy from here, but instead summarize what it's about from this review instead. So this book takes place in 1921 off the coast of Scotland on an island, and it follows 2 girls named Dinah and Evelyn, or Eve, and they're growing up in this kind of religious cult that is run by a man that they refer to as Uncle, which is super creepy. So apparently when this book opens, a young man who is the butcher in the nearby small town is making a delivery to the place where this cult lives and stumbles upon a horrific scene. 4 corpses, each with an eye cut out, and a girl that's barely alive. So that survivor is Dinah. So this book will flash back and forth between 1917 and 1921 and sort of reveal what happened to lead to this murderous scene and the conflicting accounts between the 2 girls, which is really the thing that draws me into this. It's the thing that I'm really, really interested in. I love it when a book has an unreliable narration and you don't really know what's going on and there's kind of conflicting accounts of what's happening. I think that this sounds fabulous. This is going to be a really, really amazing book. And her new book, I think it's The House on Needless Street, I think, sounds like it's going to be incredible too. So I really, really, really want to get caught up on her works. I've seen her talk before and she is awesome and really funny and she seems like a great person, which, if you know anything about me, is more than enough reason to want to read an author's books. Next up is a book that has been on my radar for a very, very long time, not just because of its beautiful cover and sprayed edges, although that always helps, but this sounds like a book that is going to be exactly my cup of tea and I'm really, really excited to read it. So this is The Animals at Lockwood Manor by Jane Healy. So this book is really stunning. It's a beautiful hardcover and check that out. I love stenciled edges. So I believe this was the Waterstones edition when it first came out, and I have been meaning to read this for absolute ages, but you know how things go. Stuff always falls on and off my TBR. I have no self-control. But this looks particularly good and it has a really interesting twist. So this book follows a character named Hetty Cartwright in August of 1939. So she is in charge of the sort of taxidermied animals from the Natural History Museum in London. I don't think it's necessarily like identified as the Natural History Museum, but is basically the Natural History Museum in London, and these artifacts are being evacuated to the countryside to a place called Lockwood Manor for safekeeping during the war. This is something that happened. Children, museums, those kinds of things that were deemed incredibly valuable in like high-risk places like London and Liverpool were evacuated out of those areas into the countryside. So we have Hetty, who is in charge of all of these exhibits, and she's going to sort of be staying at this manor for presumably the duration of the war. So as she's protecting her charges from the Lord of the Manor, who seems like he's kind of a pain in the ass, and the servants who are working around them, it seems like these animals are beginning to move around or go missing. And Hetty begins to believe that she is being haunted or stalked by something in this house. This sounds fabulous. This sounds really, really, really good. On top of that kind of description, I believe this is a sapphic novel because Hetty meets the sort of enigmatic daughter, Lucy, of the house, and I think that this is just going to be fabulous. This has so many qualities and tropes and things like that that I absolutely love, and I think it's going to be a really, really fantastic read. I actually started it a little while back, but it was during one of my many complete panic modes where I was about to go into a reading slump and therefore tried to read everything that I could to get me out of that, and it didn't end up happening. So I've technically read 36 pages of this book and it was really, really good. So this is one that's going to hop back onto my TBR so that I can finish it for the fall and winter seasons. The next book on my list is one that sort of swept through the UK when it came out. It was a huge release here. I don't know if it was a huge release elsewhere, but like it got a lot of love in the UK. I have been super, super interested in it for a long time. I actually stole the copy from my mum that I gave her for Christmas so that I could read it like 2 years ago, and it's been sat in my flat ever since, so I think it's time to finally read The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. A lot of my sort of belief that this will be a 5-star read for me is due to the fact that it got so much praise and so many people that I know whose opinions I trust really, really enjoyed it, including I think my mum, which is good because again, I gave it to her for Christmas. But this looks like a really, really interesting one. I think it might be one of the books that leans a little bit more towards the literary side of things on this list in terms of like the writing style and stuff. And I'm really excited to get to it. She has another book called Melmoth, I think, which is out now as well, and I also have on my shelves. So if I end up loving this, then I think I will probably end up enjoying that as well because I've heard nothing but good things about her writing. So this book sounds like a little bit of a weird one. So we follow a woman in 1893 London named Cora, and Cora's husband has just died. She is left a widow, and honestly she's a little bit more relieved than sad because she didn't really suit the role of being a sort of society wife. It wasn't a very happy marriage either. So she and her son Francis leave town for Essex, where she hopes that kind of the fresh air and the countryside will provide a refuge for her and her son. So they take up lodgings in Colchester, and there are rumors of the mythical Essex serpent, saying that it has like come back to roam the countryside and sort of consume humans. So she is a naturalist with sort of no patience for this sort of thing, and she kind of becomes enthralled with what the local people think is this magical beast that is running around the countryside. So she ends up meeting the local vicar, whose name is William, and he's deeply suspicious of these rumors as well, but he thinks that this is more in line with kind of a crisis of faith than anything else. So the two of them butt heads a lot, but kind of begin this intense relationship, and I believe that they kind of try to figure out what's going on with this Essex serpent. It sounds super weird. I was really surprised when I picked this up in Waterstones way, way, way back when it came out, because I feel like I expected something much more sort of straight up historical fiction from a cover like this. So I'm really, really intrigued to see what this book is all about, and I think it's going to be really, really fabulous. The next book on my list was a 2020 release that I just never got around to, and I think it's going to be fabulous. I love this author's middle grade books, and this is her adult debut. This is The Mercies by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. Every time this book comes up, like if I post a picture of it on, say, Twitter or Instagram, or even just kind of mention it anywhere, there are so many people who come out of the woodwork to say that they loved this book. This is one of their favorite books of the year, and it was fabulous. So I have really, really high hopes for this. I think I'm going to absolutely love it, especially because I love her children's books. The Girl of Ink and Stars is one of my favorites. I really love The Way Past Winter, and I actually have her new book sat on my desk right now because I hauled it this month. So I am really, really excited for this. I'm really interested to see how her wonderful writing style translates to an adult audience. So this book takes place in 1617 on a small island off the coast of Norway. So it's an island where there's kind of a fishing village. All the men and boys kind of go out to sea to, you know, do their job, and a huge storm sweeps in and basically kills every man on the island. There are a couple of old men left, there are a couple of very, very young children left, but basically this becomes overnight a sort of colony of women. So after 18 months, a man arrives from Scotland with his wife, and he is a he's a man who's determined to sort of bring these women to heel and make sure that, you know, this island is conforming to sort of society's standards. Because it is an island of all women, that must be a very frightening thing for a man like him. So his young wife sees for the first time in her life independent women, and she kind of falls under the spell. So she and her husband presumably are going to butt heads because he wants this to end, and she presumably will want to feel more of a kindred towards these women. So this book is based on real events. There was indeed the storm that happened in Christmas of 1617 and these witch trials that took place. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's probably going to happen in this book. It's apparently absolutely fabulous, as I've already said. I'm really, really interested in this because I think she's just an amazing writer. And the very last 5-star prediction that I have for this video is The Wicked Cometh by Laura Carlin. I believe that this was her debut novel, and it was another one that got a lot of attention at the time. It's one that's been on my radar for ages, but again, I'm just the worst. So this book takes place in 1831 London, and we follow a girl named Hester White. So she is a bright young woman who's desperate to escape the slums that she is born into. These horrible, horrible places in London where the city's poor are the most vulnerable, and people are disappearing constantly and no one will do anything to help them. So she ends up, I guess, having some kind of encounter with the aristocratic Brock family, and she leaps at the opportunity to improve her station. So she begins life under the tutelage of the fiercely intelligent and mysterious Rebecca Brock, but whispers of her past slowly begin to poison her new life, and both she and Rebecca are lured into the most sinister of investigations. This sounds like it's just going to be a fabulous book, and I think that this is another one that has a sapphic romance in it, but I'm not 100% sure about that, so please hold until I can report back. But this sounds like it's going to be a really fabulous historical fiction novel. I don't know if it's got the kind of like paranormal twists or sort of like, you know, witchy twists that some of the other books have, but I thought that it definitely qualified under kind of dark gothic-y historical fiction, and I'm super pumped to read it. So those are my 7 historical fiction-y, gothic-y, spooky 5-star predictions. All of these books are ones that I'm hoping to read soon. You've seen my TBRs, you've seen my monthly wrap-ups, you know how my TBRs usually go, but I really genuinely am looking forward to reading a lot of these this season, in the autumn, and over Christmas, because I think that spooky books and historical fiction books are best enjoyed during the fall and during the winter, and if you can combine the two, that's even better. I would love to hear in the comments below if you have read any of these books, or if they're in your TBR, or if you have any recommendations for historical fiction books that have that kind of supernatural twist to them, because I am always on the lookout for those. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.